Good morning. Today we'll look at Colossians chapter 4, finish up this book. Gerald told me this morning I sound like I have a cold, and I definitely do. But we just, you know how it goes with that. You just persevere and keep going. Anyway, in chapter 4, verse 1 is masters, treat your slaves justly and fairly, for you know that you also have a master in heaven. And yeah, we treat other people correctly. But what puzzles me about this is, why is this chapter 4, verse 1, when the verses preceding that in chapter 3, we're talking about that issue, and in chapter 4, verse 2, we take a totally different switch. I mean, it's one of those things in reading the Bible that I just kind of chuckle at, sometimes as to how and where they make a break in a chapter or in a verse. I mean, they didn't have chapters and verses when they were first written, of course, but they've been divided into chapters and verses so that as we read and study them, the Bible, we know specifically where to find something. I mean, if you were going to try to look up, John 3:16 and find it, if John was just one big gospel, or John 14, 1 through 7 would be a little bit harder to find. But, if it was just written, like the letters that they were, it would be much more difficult to find them. So we're fortunate that we have the books and the chapters and everything divided out and made so that it's easier for us to read and to get everything figured out, even though there are these little things like I just mentioned that kind of make me wonder sometimes. As is in chapter 4, this is Paul's farewell now in this letter to the Colossians and encouragement to them. He says, verse 2, devote yourselves to prayer, keeping alert in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray for us that God will open the door for the word, that we may declare the mystery of Christ. So Paul is asking, for them to devote themselves in prayer for themselves and for their community, but also to pray that the doors would be open for Paul and others to continue to spread the word of Jesus Christ, the word of the Messiah, this Christianity that is coming. Pray that God will open the door for the word, for this message of grace and glory and forgiveness, that they may declare Christ. Verse 5, it says, conduct yourselves wisely toward others. And then verse 6, let your speech be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer questions. And I thought that, conduct yourselves wisely, let your speech be gracious, seasoned with salt. And I kind of, wondered about that, seasoned with salt, made me think a little bit. And, you add salt to something to flavor it. I mean, you can get too much salt and then it gets to be salty and bitter and really hard to eat. But proper use of salt is to enhance the flavor of the food. And to put the salt on previous to the cooking, the preparation of it, is the best time. I mean, you put it on afterwards, it's just on top. As you put it on as you're cooking, then it gets more more a part of the meat or whatever it is you're cooking. So to season, or to let your speech be gracious, seasoned with salt, would be, so that it's there to build up others, to make them feel better, to encourage them, and to make your speech more palatable to them so that they can hear and understand, rather than, harsh and criticism, to be encouraging and loving and gracious in your speech and in your patterns that way. And, it's just, let your speech be seasoned with salt. That's just kind of a neat image in my mind. And then there's just a little break again in our reading, in mine anyway, and then it's boom. Tychicus will tell you the news about me, for he's a beloved brother. I've sent him to you. And then verse 9, he is coming with Onesimus, the faithful and beloved brother who is one of you. And so most of you are probably aware of Onesimus is the character that's at the heart of the book of Philemon. I mean, the book of Philemon, it's I think it's not even one full page in my Bible, but Onesimus was a runaway slave who encountered Paul and came to believe in Jesus and became a Christian and became an important helper of Paul. And so here, Onesimus was traveling with Tychicus, or however you say those names, to the people at Colossae with this letter and with encouragement from Paul for them. Excuse me. I told Cheryl this morning, too, I could hardly walk past a Kleenex box. But anyway, so Paul was reminding them that, this letter that we're reading was brought to the people of Colossae by Tychicus and by Onesimus, and then that these two would not only deliver the letter that was written, but, they would verbally speak, they would talk about Paul and his imprisonment. They would talk about the work that he was continuing to do through Timothy and through others that, even though Paul was imprisoned, he wasn't silenced. I mean, he was still writing letters and communicating with other people. Verse 10, Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greets you, as does Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. And so there's this group of people that are working, with Paul and establishing this early church and, to encourage others in other communities. And he says, Jesus, who is called Justice, greets you, and Epaphras, who greets you, and he's a servant of the Lord. And so Paul is reminding the people at Colossae that, not only is Paul praying for them and working for them and with them in this spread of the gospel and in their learning to live as Christians, but all of these others are working as well. And it's the way we are as church, just last Sunday at Mabel, we had our soup and sandwich, and it couldn't happen if just one person was doing it, but it's everybody pulling together and some others from the community as well kind of join in and help. And so we work together, and this is what Paul is showing to these people in this letter, that it's not just him. It's not just the people of Colossae, but it's a whole network. And that's what we are. And it's, like family too is we work together and for the good of all in so many different ways. Verse 13, Paul says, I testify for him that he has worked hard for you. And then he brings, greetings from Luke and Demas and so many others. And then in verse 16, he says, and now when this letter has been read among you, read it also to the church in Laodicea, and see that you also read the letter from Laodicea. And that letter from Laodicea, I don't know what letter that would be. It's probably one that is lost, and maybe they found it in Dead Sea Scrolls or something, or a part of it. But so Paul was saying this letter isn't meant just for you, but share it with others, encourage others. And so by the sharing of the letter and by going and visiting and talking with them, they were all, working together for the good of all, good of community in Jesus Christ.